Serving a cause greater than yourself hurts. Anybody in the military can tell you the risk you take. He couldn't put his jacket on. He couldn't comb his hair because he got hurt serving a cause greater than himself.
There usually is one United States Senator who stands above all the rest. And for the last several years, that senator has been John McCain. His courage, his character, his devotion to our country have set an example for every single one of us.
John McCain is a true American hero. Without any question, he was a person who put country first.
In every generation, there are those who put country first, who prize service ahead of self, who summon idealism from a cynical age. John McCain was such a man.
I don't think there's anybody in the U.S. Senate that was as passionate about defending our men and women who wear the uniform of the U.S. military than John McCain.
Well, John was a great human being, and I'm very, very proud that I knew him. Whether you agreed with him or not, you couldn't help but enjoy him. He had this tremendous sense of humor that not too many senators have.
One of my favorite memories of John McCain was campaigning in New Hampshire. We were on the Straight Talk Express. It was freezing cold, almost a blizzard, and we're talking about importing prescription drugs, and John McCain said, I need these drugs now because I've got pneumonia. And anyway, we climbed back on the bus and went on our way.
He and I were on two different sides of the issue, and we were having a heated discussion. But about 24 hours later, he saw me in the hall and he's like, "Hello, Timmy," which was the first time he ever said something like that. He usually says, "Tim" or "Senator." He was willing to extend an olive branch.
During his campaign in 2008, I was asked to come help out as a volunteer and to play the role of then Senator Barack Obama. When there was a tough debate or a tough poll, he would say something like, "Don't worry, it's always darkest before it's absolutely pitch black."
And there are funny instances where I'd be doing an interview and he'd jump in and, use his, quote, North Dakota accent and talk about the movie Fargo and fun stuff like that. But his warmth, and somebody who, really gave his whole life to service of his country in the military, obviously as a prisoner of war.
What is your name? Lieutenant Commander John McCain.
He served our country well. He was willing to put his life on the line. He was willing to suffer and bleed for our country, quite literally, in a way that most Americans will never fully understand.
Senator Dan Sullivan and I, both veterans, accompanied Senator McCain on this trip to Vietnam. What was most remarkable is that in spite of the terrors that he experienced while imprisoned there in Vietnam, he was able to forgive and move on and attempt to bring our two countries closer together.
We went to Vietnam, went back to Hanoi, to the place where he had been held a prisoner of war for 5.5 years, went to the lake where he had been shot down. And he was met with a hero's welcome, but he was met that way no matter where he went.
John McCain was not only a hero here in America, he was a hero to so many people, particularly in Eastern Europe, people that were fighting to be free, to shed the legacy of the Soviet Union. He represented individual liberty, democracy. He represented all that was best about this country to the world, and people loved him for that.
He has been the stalwart all around the world that has demonstrated America's goodness, whether it's human rights, trying to right a wrong.
I traveled to places like Afghanistan with him and saw how deeply he cared for the men and women in uniform.
John McCain cooked up this idea of going to Libya, and unbeknown to me, because I was not here very long, we weren't supposed to be going to Libya. We didn't have an embassy functioning. The Americans were not supposed to be on the ground. Kind of an insight into John McCain. If there was something going on in the world, he wanted to be there. He didn't want to read about it. He didn't want to hear about it. He wanted to see it. And that was one time I got to see it with him.
He was a man who loved his country and was beloved in return.
Best memories I have of Senator McCain that demonstrates just how tenacious he is we were sort of at the low point of the 2008 campaign, and he was trailing badly in all the early presidential polls on the Republican primary. And John McCain, to his great credit, and again demonstrating just the kind of person he was, decided that the best way to do it was to take it directly to the people. And it literally transformed that campaign.
They may not know it, but the Mac is back. John was a man of courage, and his courage is going to be greatly, greatly missed.
I knew him as a trusted colleague, a courageous legislator, and a close friend.
I remember the first time John shared his displeasure with one of my votes in the Armed Services Committee. And I remember afterwards coming up to him and saying, look, I'm going to do what I think is right on this thing here. And he says, that's exactly what I expect of you. And that's the type of attitude he had.
He was a guy that loved his country, loved his family, and loved the Senate, and tried to do what he felt like was right.
I think the way he'd want to be honored would be just as a person who did his best. And while John McCain was often right and occasionally wrong, he was never in doubt.
We will mourn him, and we'll honor him, and we'll be celebrating the truly remarkable life of an American hero.
It's time to pause and say this was a great man. He gave everything for us.
So it is only right that today, near the end of his long journey, John lies here in this great hall, under this mighty dome, like other American heroes before him. Here, as a restless wave approaches the shores of eternity, we thank God for giving this country John McCain.
I see now that I was part of something important that drew me along in its wake, even when I was diverted by other interests. I was, knowingly or not, along for the ride as America made the future better than the past.
I think what he taught all of us is you can do this job and do it civilly, and do it where you can reach across the aisle and deal with people with different points of view and get the job done.
I think John will be remembered for many things, his quick wit, his great passion. But John also left an indelible mark on our political culture.
His voice is a perfect example of being an independent voice for your people, regardless of political party.
I will never forget what he did for our defense of this country, his passion for it, his love for his country, and frankly what he did for veterans across this country.
His military history, his service to our country, his compassion towards the ideals of freedom that he fought for, he was one of a kind.
Nothing is inevitable here. Americans never quit. We never surrender. We never hide from history. We make history.
John will inspire courage. He will reinforce the idea nothing is inevitable as long as a few people are willing to fight for what they believe is right.